You hit the number, the salary, the business, the milestone you'd been carrying around for years. You finally reached it. And for about 3 days, it felt real. Then something strange happened. The quiet came back. That same low-level restlessness, that same background noise that had been there since you were 17, telling you that you weren't quite enough yet. So you set a new target, bigger, further out, because obviously that one will fix it. Here's what nobody warns you about. Success doesn't silence the noise. It amplifies it. And if the foundation underneath you is wrong, the wrong beliefs, the wrong identity, the wrong understanding of why you even want what you want, then every win you achieve just builds a taller tower on unstable ground. Most high achievers discover this too late. And the scary part? The smarter you are, the harder it is to see. Most people think confusion means you don't have enough information. But that's not what's actually happening. You don't feel lost because you lack clarity. You feel lost because the rules you've been following were never designed for the life you actually want. And the more intelligently you follow them, the deeper the confusion gets. In this video, you're going to understand 5 things. Why success often makes driven people feel worse, not better. Why discipline without direction becomes a trap. Why high performers quietly self-sabotage right before their biggest breakthroughs. Why your environment is shaping you more powerfully than your intentions ever could. And what the psychology of success actually looks like, underneath the strategy, the habits, and the advice. By the end, you won't just recognize the feeling, you'll understand exactly where it's coming from. These ideas come from The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett, structured around 33 laws of business and life, drawn from his own experience and from hundreds of conversations with some of the most successful people in the world. But first, who is Stephen Bartlett, and why does his story matter here? Because his credibility isn't academic. It's earned through a very specific kind of failure. Stephen dropped out of university at 18. No degree. No backup plan, just a burning need to prove something to a world that hadn't given him much reason to feel confident in the first place. He grew up working class. He felt like an outsider most of his childhood. And he carried that quiet hunger into everything he built. By his mid-20s, he had founded Social Chain, a social media agency that became a global powerhouse, working with some of the world's biggest brands. He was making millions. He was making headlines. He was doing the thing. And then right at the moment most people would celebrate and stop, he had a quiet breakdown. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind you post about. The kind where you're winning by every external measure and you sit alone in a room and feel nothing that matches what you thought you'd feel. He stepped down as CEO of his own company. He started a podcast. And he began asking out loud the questions that most successful people are too afraid to whisper in private. What does success mean if you feel empty when you get there? What's the cost of ignoring your inner life while chasing your outer one? Why does getting what you wanted not feel like what you imagined? Those questions became this book. And here's the crucial thing most people misread about it. This isn't a collection of productivity hacks. The 33 laws are not about doing more. They're about understanding why you do what you already do and what you'll need to change about yourself before anything else can change. As Bartlett puts it, and this is the idea the entire book orbits, your life is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. Sit with that for a second, because that one line alone might explain why you've stayed in situations you knew were wrong, accepted less than you were worth, or kept playing small in a world that needed you bigger. Here is the single idea the entire book builds around. Your outer world is a lagging indicator of your inner world. Think of your internal life, your beliefs about what you deserve, your unconscious story about who you are, as a thermostat. It has a set point. You can work harder. You can optimize your morning routine. You can study every business framework ever written, but if the thermostat is calibrated to a certain temperature, the room will always return to that temperature. always. This is why some people make $1 million and lose it within 3 years, and genuinely can't explain how. This is why some people keep building businesses that collapse in the same way, through the same patterns, just wearing different masks. This is why some people keep attracting the same relationships, the same conflicts, the same invisible ceiling, no matter how many times they change the external variables. It's the thermostat pulling things back to its calibrated setting. Bartlett's entire framework, all 33 laws, is really one single project. Understand where your thermostat is set, understand how it got there, and reset it deliberately instead of by accident. Everything we cover today builds from this. Idea 1. Success doesn't fix you. It exposes you. Most people carry a quiet belief that success will solve their internal problems. More money, less anxiety. More recognition, more confidence. More progress, more peace. That's the assumption. But here's what Bartlett observed, both in himself and in every high performer he interviewed on his podcast. Success doesn't remove your insecurities, it amplifies them. The psychological mechanism at work here is what he calls identity lag. The gap between how fast your external life changes and how slowly your internal self-concept catches up. Think about it this way. You've probably felt this. You achieve something real, a promotion, a milestone, a goal that took years. And instead of feeling like the person who achieved that, you feel like someone who got lucky and is waiting to be found out. That's not weakness. That's identity lag in action. Your external world has moved forward, but internally, you still carry the story of who you were before you built the thing. And that story quietly shapes how much of the win you actually let yourself feel. Bartlett describes a moment at 23, sitting in the boardroom of his own company, about to close the biggest deal in their history. And instead of feeling the satisfaction of what they'd built, he was waiting. Quietly waiting for someone to walk in and tell him it was all a mistake. The business was real. The results were real. But the internal story hadn't updated. Here's the part most people never realize. Success doesn't create the pressure you feel. It reveals the pressure that was already there. The insecurity was always running in the background. The achievement just turned up the volume. This is why people with objectively impressive lives still feel like frauds. This is why high earners still feel financially anxious. This is why people with influence still crave validation. It's not ingratitude. It's unresolved internal wiring. If your life doubled in scale tomorrow, the income, the recognition, the reach, would your mindset be able to hold it? Or would your internal story quietly pull it back? Idea 2. You're not chasing success. You're chasing relief. This is subtle, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. A significant amount of what looks like ambition is actually escape. Not escape from work, escape from a feeling, escape from the sensation of not being enough, of being behind, of being unseen. Bartlett calls this the void, and he's brutal about identifying it in himself. He describes spending years pursuing external validation, press coverage, follower counts, the approval of people who didn't know him. Not because those things were strategically valuable, but because each one temporarily quieted something inside him that he hadn't dealt with. The void isn't a character flaw. It's almost universal among people who build things. It's often the fuel for building remarkable things. But here's the problem. The void doesn't close when you win. It's not designed to. The void is a hole, and wins are water you pour into it. Some wins are buckets, some are oceans, but the hole stays a hole. You've felt this. You've worked towards something for months, achieved it, felt the relief for a few days, and then noticed the restlessness creeping back. And instead of pausing to ask why, you set a bigger target, because the movement itself felt better than the stillness. That's not ambition. That's avoidance wearing ambition's clothes. The psychological mechanism is this. When your motivation is avoidance-based, you're not moving towards something. You're moving away from something. And the problem with moving away from something is that you never actually arrive anywhere. You just keep running, faster and faster, toward a destination that keeps receding. Bartlett asks the question directly, If no one could see your success, no followers, no recognition, no external proof, would you still want it? That question is not a judgment. It's a diagnostic. Because if the honest answer is no, or even probably not, then you're not building a life. You're building a performance. And here's the open loop worth carrying forward. Because we'll come back to this. When your identity is tied to a performance, every decision you make becomes about protecting the performance, not about actually building something true. That distinction quietly determines everything. What are you actually chasing underneath the goal you've named? Pause here for a second, because I want to name something. Everything we've covered so far, identity lag, the void, ambition as avoidance, this is not the kind of content most people want to sit with. It's easier to watch a video about morning routines, but here's why this matters. You cannot debug a system you've never looked at. The most sophisticated productivity strategy in the world cannot compensate for a broken internal foundation. You will just execute faster toward the wrong destination. This is what Bartlett means when he says the 33 laws are not about doing more. They're about seeing clearly first. With that, let's go deeper. Idea 3, your environment is deciding more than you are. You believe your decisions define your life. But the uncomfortable truth is that most of your behavior isn't decided. It's automated. And the thing doing the automating? Your environment. Bartlett frames this precisely. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your systems. Here's how this plays out in practice. You want to focus, but your phone is on the desk. You want to think clearly. But your environment is noisy and reactive. You want to do the deep work, but your calendar is full of shallow obligations. So what happens? You default, not because you lack discipline, but because the environment is structurally stronger than the intention. The brain is a pattern-matching, energy-conserving machine. It constantly looks for the lowest friction path. And your environment defines what low friction looks like every single day. This is why two people with identical talent and identical goals can end up in completely different places in 5 years. Not because one worked harder, but because one built environments that made the right behavior the default, and the other relied on willpower to fight their environment constantly. Willpower depletes. Environments persist. There's a deeper layer here that Bartlett returns to repeatedly, the law he calls the power of proximity. The people you spend the most time with don't just influence your mood, they calibrate what your brain considers normal. Normal levels of ambition, normal tolerance for discomfort, normal standards of work, normal expectations of what's possible. This recalibration is invisible in the short term, but it's catastrophic in the long term. You can have brilliant intentions and a detailed strategy, and a social environment that silently resets your sense of what's acceptable every single day. He's direct about a hard consequence of this. Some relationships are expensive, not financially, in terms of who they're slowly training you to become. What does your daily environment, your phone, your space, your 5 closest people, quietly teach you to expect of yourself? Idea 4, you don't fear failure. You fear being seen failing. People say they're afraid of failing, but if you press on that, it's almost never accurate. What people are actually afraid of is being witnessed failing, because failure in private is just information. Failure in public is a threat to identity. And your brain, wired for social survival, treats identity threats the same way it treats physical danger. Think about the last time you hesitated to start something, not because you couldn't do it, but because of what you'd have to be seen attempting and potentially not achieving. What if it doesn't work? What if people notice? What if it confirms what part of you already suspects about yourself? That's not fear of the outcome. That's fear of the exposure. Bartlett calls this one of the most expensive patterns in business because it doesn't manifest as visible paralysis. It manifests as disguised hesitation. People don't fail publicly. They quit privately. They call it being strategic. They call it waiting for the right time. They call it doing more research. But underneath all of that, the mechanism is social risk avoidance. the brain protecting the reputation before it has had a chance to earn the outcome. Here's the open loop worth carrying. When you protect your identity more than you protect your direction, you end up building nothing real. You build an image of someone who could have built something, which is the most frustrating outcome of all. What would you attempt right now, today, if the outcome was invisible to everyone except you? Let me point out the shape of what we've covered. Idea 1, your past identity limits your current reality. Idea 2, your deeper motivation may be escape, not growth. Idea 3, your environment is deciding on your behalf. Idea 4, your fear is social, not rational. Notice what Bartlett hasn't said yet. He hasn't told you to wake up earlier. He hasn't given you a framework for productivity. He hasn't mentioned a morning routine. Because he understands the sequence. Until you understand the system generating your behavior, all the tactics in the world are just noise on top of a broken signal. One more idea, and this is where it all connects. Idea 5, discipline without direction is just a faster way to get lost. Discipline is the most celebrated virtue in self-improvement culture, and it deserves celebration. It's genuinely powerful. But Bartlett adds a caveat that most people never hear. Discipline applied to the wrong direction doesn't build success. It builds a very confident, very consistent version of being lost. He describes this through what he calls the discipline equation. The idea that sustained discipline requires 3 aligned conditions. The goal must feel genuinely valuable, the process must carry its own reward, and the cost of the pursuit must feel proportionate to what you're building toward. When those 3 things are aligned, discipline feels like flow. When they're not, when you're grinding toward a goal that doesn't actually reflect who you are or what you value, discipline becomes a prison. You wake up early, you work hard, you stay consistent. And something still feels off, not because you're not disciplined enough, because you've been precisely disciplined toward the wrong target. Here's the psychological trap that makes this hard to see. Consistency creates attachment. The more time and energy you invest in a direction, the harder it becomes to question whether that direction is right. Behavioral economists call this the sunk cost fallacy. You keep going, not because the path is correct, but because you've already come so far. Bartlett names this plainly. Many people aren't building their future. They're defending their past decisions. And there's a version of this at the organizational level too. The business that keeps iterating on a product the market stopped wanting because the team is too invested in what they've already built to pivot clearly. The law he builds from this: before you optimize your discipline, verify your direction. And there's a sharp question embedded in that. Are you progressing or just repeating? Because from the outside, they look identical. Both involve effort. Both involve showing up. Both involve the language of growth. But one is compounding towards something real, and one is cementing a pattern that feels productive but produces nothing new. If you kept going exactly as you are right now, same direction, same effort, same systems, where do you actually arrive in 3 years? Step back now and look at what connects these 5 ideas. Your identity lags behind your achievements. Your ambition is partly powered by avoidance. Your environment calibrates your defaults. Your fear is fundamentally social. And your discipline can cement the wrong direction if it's not pointed correctly. These are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 expressions of the same underlying pattern. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is almost never a knowledge gap. It's almost always an identity gap. You know what to do. You've read enough. You have the information. What hasn't been resolved yet is whether you believe you're the person who gets to do it, and whether the system underneath your behavior has actually been updated to match your goals. This is the architecture behind Bartlett's 33 laws. The person who can't keep the money doesn't have a financial knowledge problem. Their self-worth thermostat is set below their income level. The person who keeps building teams that collapse doesn't have a hiring problem. They're tolerating bar lowerers because the short-term discomfort of addressing them feels worse than the long-term cost of keeping them. And every tolerance sets a precedent. Every precedent resets the culture. The person who keeps attracting the same conflicts isn't unlucky. Their proximity environment has calibrated what they consider normal, and normal is what they keep recreating. The pattern, in Bartlett's own words, you're not building your future, you're revealing your past at scale. Not action items, not a to-do list. 3 specific shifts in how you think, because thinking differently is what produces different behavior. The action follows the internal change, not the other way around. Shift 1. Treat your inner narrative like a business problem, not a self-esteem exercise, not journaling for catharsis, a diagnostic audit. Your recurring outcomes are data points. They're telling you what your internal system currently believes is normal, acceptable, and deserved. This week, look at one area of your life where results keep returning to the same place despite your effort. Write down the pattern. Then ask, what belief would someone have to hold for this outcome to keep occurring? That belief is operating in you. Named, it can be questioned. Unnamed, it runs everything. Shift 2. Stop asking, what should I do? Start asking, what is driving this? Before your next major decision, add one layer of depth. Not, should I take this opportunity, but am I pursuing this because it aligns with what I actually value, or because it temporarily quiets something I haven't dealt with? This isn't paralysis. It's precision. 2 minutes of honest self-questioning before a major decision changes more than 2 years of optimizing the execution of the wrong choice. Shift 3. Audit your environment before you upgrade your willpower. Write down the 5 people you interact with most in a given week. Then ask one question about each of them. What does sustained time with this person make feel normal to me? Normal standards, normal ambition, normal tolerance for difficulty. Whatever that answer is, that's the gravitational field you're operating inside. You can choose to be aware of that field and work with it consciously. Or you can drift inside it and wonder why your intentions keep losing to your defaults. You don't need to cut anyone off. You just need to see clearly. Most people spend years tweaking their actions, work harder, focus more, build better habits. But almost nobody asks, what system is producing those actions in the first place? Because once you see that system, the hidden thermostat, the identity lag, the social fear, everything shifts, not instantly, not dramatically, but permanently. You stop mistaking motion for progress. You stop being confused by your own behavior. And you start building results that actually reflect who you are, not just a performance of who you think you should be. If you're working hard but something still feels off, it's not because you're doing too little. It's because something underneath is deciding more than you realize. The real work isn't strategy, it's understanding the architecture behind the strategy. If that landed, subscribe, because ideas worth thinking about deserve more than one conversation. In next video, you'll see why money disappears and how to make them stay. Choose your next step. I'll see you there.